be agreed to, and I call the member for Solomon.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the member for Warringah for this motion, and I want to acknowledge the member for Kingsford Smith when he said that it showed the priorities of those opposite the way that they handled this pandemic response, economic response, particularly when it comes to JobKeeper. It's a good example to use, where some companies, including foreign-owned ones, didn't need JobKeeper, got heaps of it, whilst Australian small businesses went to the wall. It's no secret that I think those economic supports were lifted too quickly by the federal government, and I spoke many times in this place saying exactly that. The vaccine hadn't rolled out yet. There wasn't enough dedicated quarantine around the country. It was much too early. And when those opposite cut JobKeeper back in March, I was also calling for targeted industry-specific support, because we knew that the lockdowns would keep coming and that our community would continue to be affected for a long time to come. Now, we also knew that those lockdowns would keep rolling because those opposite totally failed to develop a national quarantine framework, as I said, with the exception of Howard Springs, a fantastic facility in the top end. And well done to all those who have been working there. I had 2 weeks stay there myself, Mr Deputy Speaker, and they do an excellent job, but we needed more of that. And we know that hotels are no good at containing a highly transmissible virus, Deputy Speaker. And even now that we've been able to reach higher vaccination rates, and there's some opening of the borders, we're faced with potentially a new variant. We're hoping that our hospitals won't be overwhelmed as people begin to move, but we know that industries continue to need our support. So it's a great initiative of the member for Warringah bring forward this motion. It's important to note that there are a number of sectors that have copped huge losses, and they'll take a while to get back on their feet. That's just the reality of it. We saw this in my electorate in Darwin and Palmerston in one sector, business events sector. They lost about $30 billion worth of revenue for events that were cancelled in 2020. And in Darwin, one example is that we were going to host the Developing Northern Australia Conference in August. Now, everything was ready to go. The Territory went into a snap lockdown, and I myself was trapped in the ACT lockdown at the time. But I really want to commend the organisers of that North Australia Conference, because with virtually no notice, they moved it to a totally online or virtual conference. They did a great job, but there's no denying there was a massive loss of revenue to our local hotels, our hospitality sector and local tourism operators. So many Territorians and their businesses suffered as a result. And that's just one event over the past almost 2 years that we've been battling this pandemic. The Territory's tourism sector has especially suffered. It's very seasonal, as honourable members would know, with the dry season being the time when a lot of those tourism businesses make the majority of their funds. But who was locked out? Sydney and Melbourne markets due to lockdowns. Why? Because hotel quarantine leaked. Why? Because there was no dedicated quarantine in those places. For many of our tour operators, their ability to retain their workforces was also greatly hindered. Now, the dry season is when the majority of the workers come, but if they can't retain the workers over the wet, it becomes very difficult. Now, how do you keep a business afloat and people employed in the face of such uncertainty? Our national arts sector has been completely smashed, largely unable to tour, to stage shows and dealing with cancellations, and their workforce were mostly left out of JobKeeper support. So it's been devastating for that sector. It's the arts that got many of Australians through the long and dreary months of lockdown. So the least that the federal government could do is to acknowledge those workers in the arts sector and include them in support schemes. So tourism and the arts sector are very hard hit, and I haven't got time to go into the universities, but Charles Darwin University, through a lack of support, has done it incredibly hard as well, and the federal government needs to do better.